Hi and welcome. I have introduced you to the file class in the previous video, correct? Now let's deep dive into it. Let's see its constructors and methods. Okay, we have seen a constructor already. File class, constructors. Fine. So the constructors of first constructor is nothing but which we have seen, which we write equals to new class and new file, and it takes a string. That is nothing but our path. It can be a path of the file or a path of the directory. Correct? This is the first constructor which we have already seen. There is second constructor here is nothing but file f equals to new file, and here we pass the path of the directory, right, and the path of the file which we want to create inside the directory. Okay, path. And then when we use f dot create new file function, what actually is happening now is the new file will be created inside this particular directory. This is the second constructor. Fine. So we will pass the directory path and we will pass the file path which we want to create, and we will simply create that file. You can directly write the file name also here. It will just take this path. Third is nothing but we can directly pass the file reference. Let's say f1 equals to new file, and this f file is already pointing to some directory or file, correct? And I want this f1 again to point to this particular directory, and I want to create a file inside this directory. F is pointing to a directory and I want to create a file inside this directory. So instead of writing the path again, I can directly use f1, and I can directly use f and give the file name here which I want to create. Then f1 dot new create file will simply create the file inside the directory which is pointed by f. So this is nothing but, the constructor is nothing but, it will contain the file reference as the first argument, and second it will have the path and the name. Okay, the name of the file, not the path, the name of the file that we want to create inside this directory, the name of the file that we want to create inside this directory. Fine. So since f was already pointing to directory, we can directly use f here. Fine. Otherwise, we have to give the complete path. So these are the three constructors of the file class. Then let's move on to the file class methods. The different methods that are provided by the file class that helps us. We have seen some methods already, haven't we? We have seen exist methods, correct? Exists, which return true or false, so its return type is boolean. If the file or the directory already exists, it will return true. If does not exist, it returns false. We have seen create new method, create new file method. Okay, its return type is also boolean. I told you if the file already exists, it will not do anything. So if the file exists, it will simply return false because there is no work for him. And if the file does not exist, then it will return true. It will create the file and return true. Return true, create the file. Fine. This is how create new file method works. Similarly, in the similar sense, mkdir works. Same. If the directory already exists, it returns false. If the directory already does not exist, it creates the directory and returns true. Okay. Now f can point, means this file reference can point to both file or directory. Correct? So how can we know to which it is pointing? So for that, there are two methods, that is nothing but isFile method. So isFile method tells us whether this reference is pointing to a file or it is pointing to a directory. So isFile and isDirectory. Okay. So we can simply call f.isFile, and both are boolean, f.isFile. And if it returns true, that means f is pointing to a file, else it is pointing to a directory. Fine. Now the next method is, suppose we are in a directory and it contains many more directories and some files. Fine. I want the list of all the files and directories that are under this directory, pointed by a reference variable f. I want all the directories and the files that are present inside this directory. Let's say the directory name is test. I want all the files and directories present inside this test. Or let's say the directory name is Java. Fine. So for that, the function that is given to us is list. That it will list out all the names of all the files and directories present inside a particular directory. Fine. As it returns a string array, so it will be string s equals to f dot list. So it will return a string array to us that will contain all in string all the names. Fine. The next method is nothing but the length method. It is simple. If you want to know the number of characters present inside a file, the length of the file, then we will use the length method. Okay, number of characters. Fine. Now the number of characters can be even long. If it is a very big file, it can go into the long range. So therefore, the return type of the length method is not int, it is long. Return type is fine. And finally, if you want to delete the file, we can directly use delete method and it will delete the file. Okay. So these are the important methods in our file class. There are three constructors. Fine. If you the two constructors work when you want to create a file inside a directory. The method exist method, create new file method. Is it a file that my reference variable is pointing to, or it is a directory? So for that we use is directory and is file. If you want to know all the names of the files and directories present inside a specific directory, in that case we use list method. List method returns a string array. Okay, it contains in string format all the names of directories and files. Then there is length method. If you want to know the number of characters, the length of your file, in that case we use length method and its return type is long because the length, the number of characters can go above int range. And finally, we have our delete method. Fine, just make a note of them. We'll see now these methods in our example in code. Okay, so do make a note of them. Fine.